Hello and welcome to Grade.com Talks. Today we're talking with CJ Dodge, Information and Referral Specialist at Alliance Center for Independence, an organization that provides information and referral services and develops and implements educational programs, innovative activities that promote activism, peer support, health and wellness, empowerment, and independent living skills for people with disabilities and their ally. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that supports the philosophy of independent living for all persons with disabilities. Hello, CJ. Welcome to Great.com Talks. We're excited to have you here.
Excited to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Could you please describe Alliance Center for Independence for someone who is not familiar with your work?
So the Alliance Center for Independence is one of 11 centers for independent living in New Jersey. Centers for independent living are all over the United States. And our services are to help individuals with disabilities to live as independently as possible and to support them in any way that they can in order to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So we were founded in 1986. We serve 3 counties of New Jersey. So we serve Union County, Somerset County, and Middlesex County. But the 11 centers of Centers for Independent Living in New Jersey cover all the counties of New Jersey. So if you don't live in one of our areas, you will be served by one of the other centers. And so we also serve all individuals with disabilities, so all disabilities, all kinds. We serve all ages. And another thing that sets Centers for Independent Living apart from other disability-related agencies is, one, most of our services are free, and most of our services are based on self-direction. So individuals with disabilities who want to live more independently and learn skills, they come to us and say, these are the things that we would like to accomplish, and we help them do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What I really like about your approach, you mentioned self-direction and independent living for people with disabilities. So that's quite interesting factor that you are working in that environment, in that sphere, and advocating and also teaching individuals with disabilities and directing them in their pathway of becoming self-sufficient and self-independent. So the work that you've been doing for the past 25 years is very meaningful, and I applaud your organization for doing so. For people who are not familiar with the challenges that people living with disabilities face, could you please describe some of the challenges, some of the barriers that make their living and independence a little harder compared to abled individuals?
So there's a lot of different avenues that we help individuals with disabilities, and many things within society that can be challenging. It can be something like access to employment. It can be access to accessible housing or other accessible buildings. It can be making sure individuals with disabilities understand and have access to voting. It can be learning independent living skills, learning financial skills, learning how to interact with your state and your federal legislators to make sure that policies and laws are being enacted that support individuals with disabilities in the community. So lots of topics like that are things that we focus on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there seems that when we think about challenges that people with disabilities face, we only think about navigation. You mentioned about accessibility, but there are also challenges with practicing their political rights, with practicing their social rights and their employment rights. And it's very important to address those challenges, to address those issues, and your work in advocating those issues and communicating them to policymakers, whether it's in a state level, local level, or federal level, is very, very important. Your organization supports the philosophy of independent living for people with disabilities. But what does independent living mean? Can you explain that for us?
So, two of the things that we like to say here at the Alliance Center for Independence are Alliance Center for Independence believes in the philosophy that disability is a natural and beautiful part of human diversity, as well as the fact that we believe that individuals with the disabilities and the disability community have the right to live independently within the community, not separate from the community, and to receive the supports that they need and needed in order to do so. Um, that's the two things that are probably the core of all of the programs and all of the things that we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that having a disability, it's a part of life, and it's a beautiful process you mentioned, and there shouldn't be any neglect, there shouldn't be any stigma on it, rather than people living with disabilities should be part of the community. They should feel supported, and those and live independently regardless of their abilities. So that's important to indicate that. But if we take to day-to-day activities, or in terms of their concrete particular rights, particular freedoms, can you please go deeper on that for individuals who are not very familiar with it?
Sure. So, one of the things that we do is we do a lot of community outreach, not only with legislators, both federal and the state, but we reach out to community organizations. We reach out to town governments. We also reach out to first responders and other types of emergency preparedness organizations. All types of people that are important within the infrastructure of society, to make sure that they understand the needs and the important aspects of what it's like to be an individual with a disability, and to make sure that the way that the policies and the way that the structure of certain programs are not forgetting that fact. So, one of the things that we enjoy doing is taking part in our community and in the counties that we serve, to make sure that, if there is an issue that someone comes to us with, that we make sure that we support them either with one of the services that we have, or to make sure that they're connected with an organization or another service that will be able to support them with what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very important to communicate to all the members of the infrastructure, all the members of the community, the needs of the people with disabilities. And it's important to make sure that every infrastructure is accessible, and every venue, it takes into consideration the people with disabilities, not only the infrastructure part, but it's also very important to understand their employment needs. You mentioned other advocacy work. So it's great that you are addressing them, and you're communicating and outreaching to community members, opinion leaders, and educating them on that matter. You run, as a organization, you run several programs, but your two key program services that you provide are independent living skills and information referral. Could you please describe those services in more detail and the impact they have on individuals who come to your organization?
Yeah, sure. So some of our core services are, including those, are independent living skills. So that's teaching, groups of individuals or one-on-one the skills that they need in order to live independently. And that could be, things working around their house. That could be financial skills. That could be communication skills. That could be, how to function within their household, that type of thing. That can also be communicating and making friends, and being part of the community. So that's one of the things that we do. We also, as you mentioned, do information referral, and that's one of the things that I actually do at the Alliance Center for Independence. So that's connecting individuals with the programs that we do. And then if it's a need that we don't handle, then my job is to make sure that that individual finds another organization or another place where their needs can be met. Another thing that we do is individual and systems advocacy. So that's some of what we were talking about before. So we'll go out into the community and advocate for disability-related issues. And the other half of that is teaching individuals with disabilities how to advocate for themselves. And so that's teaching them how to connect with their legislators. It's teaching them how to effectively communicate their needs and their desires to the services that are supporting them. We also do a lot of peer support. So one of the things during the pandemic, a lot of our services went virtual, and then all of our services were virtual for a while. And so we had Zoom peer groups that met weekly so that people could connect and maintain relationships and continue to maintain skills. And so peer support and connecting within the community and connecting other individuals with disabilities is something that's very important that we foster here at the Alliance Center. And then the last thing that we do as far as our core services is transition services. So that's assisting folks that are either in more medical facilities that want to live out in the community, and then also individuals that are in school and then are transitioning to either the workforce or to higher education. So we help them and support them with that transition. So those are some of the core services that we provide.
Yeah, it's great to see that you offer variety and the range of the different programs that are directed not only to teaching functional skills around the households, but also directed at bringing community together through the peer support as well as the advocacy work, whether it's self-advocacy or the advocacy on a group level, as well as you mentioned that a transitional program, that whether it's transitioning from a nursing home or transitioning from a school to employment. So it's great to see there is all in one shop organization, but you mentioned you take an individual approach. If their needs are not being met, you will make sure that you get all the need, you direct them to other services available so they can find a solution that best fits their needs. So it's wonderful to see that variety range as well as the one-to-one approach that your organization offers. And one of the other programs that you run, it's all about work program. Could you please explain that program for us?
Yeah, of course. So a large part of the mandate for Centers for Independent Living, including the Alliance Center for Independence, is to help with employment. And so there are kind of two main agencies that are state agencies that we work with that help individuals with disabilities gain employment and learn employment-based skills. One of the ones that you're talking about through It's All About Work is the Division of Vocational Rehab. So we do work with individuals that are referred to from them here to the Alliance Center to work one-on-one with them for pre-employment skills. And that can be something all the way from, working on communication and eye contact and conversation, all the way up to finding what interests they have for employment, working on resumes, working on skills for job interviews, and then working on workplace skills. So maintaining jobs, maintaining relationships with your employer, with your coworkers, organizational skills, or all the things that one would need to be an effective employee. Those are things that we can work on with individuals. So we work on them through individuals, through programs with the Division of Vocational Rehab, but we also work with folks through the Division of Developmental Disabilities, which is another state organization that refers folks to us for employment-based services.
Mhm. Yeah, it's important to prepare individuals on how you mentioned how to prepare for the interviews, but also what you're doing is you're doing the career counseling, right? So you're understanding what are some of their interests and what where the skills can be implemented, so they can find. An employment opportunity that is sustainable, that brings them joy, and that they can do for a long time. So, and you mentioned about communication skills, so they can communicate better with their future colleagues and maintain that employment for as long as they want to. So it's important to see that you provide a platform and tools, and make it available for individuals living with disability if they want to get employment, and make sure the transition is as smooth as possible, and it can benefit them very much. So it's important and very great to see that. We talked about some advocacy work that you do, but could you please describe, bring some cases that you were able to achieve, some changes that you were able to make within your within the counties that you work with through your advocacy?
Sure. One of the things that we worked on was the state budget. So we connected with state legislators and made sure that Centers for Independent Living were not forgotten when the state budget was being put together, and we were successful in gaining some funding for Centers for Independent Living with the other centers that were also advocating with us. We also worked a lot with legislators and emergency preparedness folks to make sure that individuals with disabilities weren't being forgotten during the pandemic. There was a big issue in the beginning of the pandemic, with just like everybody finding vaccinations and finding appropriate personal protective equipment, but also individuals with disabilities who needed personal care or personal attendance that come into the home. That became more of an issue when you have a pandemic to think about, making sure that their services were being kept up during the pandemic. We had people reaching out to us to help that, and we connected folks with services. Another thing that we did, even when we shut down as far as in-person services, we reached out to all of our consumers in all three counties. So we serve over 13,000 people, and we have about 3,000 and a half consumers that we work with, that we reached out to by phone and by email back in the early months of the pandemic, just to make sure that they were okay, to make sure that if they needed anything, that they knew that we were here to help if we could. Another thing that we did during the pandemic is we run a small food pantry, which expanded to a little bit bigger during the pandemic because the need was bigger. And so what makes our food pantry a little bit different is a lot of food pantries are not accessible. And so we make sure that individuals that can't access food elsewhere were able to come to the Alliance Center and get services here. So those are some of the things that we did to make sure that policies and procedures were not forgetting individuals with disabilities and the community. Another thing that we do a lot of work with is voting. Every election cycle, we make sure that we go out into the community and register people to vote. We do presentations for individuals with disabilities to make sure they understand their right to vote and how to vote. We've done demonstrations to teach people how to use voting machines. And so we support, the individuals with disabilities' right to vote, because one of the mottos of Centers for Independent Living in the disability community is nothing about us without us. And so that's talking about there shouldn't be policies or laws being enacted or being made without the opinions and the votes of the disability community. So that's something that we strongly support. We've done forums where we've had candidates come and talk to the community and tell them their viewpoints and their positions, and had them answer questions. So those are some things that we've done with voting. We also yearly go down to the state capitol and hold a day where individuals with disabilities can speak about the issues that they find important right on the Capitol steps. So that's something that we do yearly during the summer, so that it makes sure that the needs of individuals with disabilities in our community are loudly expressed and are understood.
Yeah, you have indeed made quite an impact through your advocacy work, whether it was getting funding for the programs directed to individuals with disabilities, or you were there during the pandemic as a help, as an organization that supported several thousands individuals with disabilities and made sure there were services available for them, and as well as your work on consistent everyday level on making sure that individuals with disabilities can practice their political voting rights, and their needs are being heard through the policy work, whether it's in the Congress or the politicians that choose to represent them. So it's indeed, although you are based in, you are working on three counties, but the impact that you have is far extend from what within the community that you're working. If someone would like to support Alliance Center for Independence, how can they do that?
So you can go to our website, which is www.adacil.org. And once you're on that website, you can connect to all of our social media, so our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, and within those pages, you'll see our PayPal account if you choose to donate to the Alliance Center, or when and if you choose to come to our doors here in Edison, you can make an in-person donation as well if that works better for you.
Wonderful. The link to the Alliance Center for Independence website will be provided in the description. So you viewing and listening can go to the website and familiarize yourself with the wonderful work CJ and the team at Alliance Center for Independence is doing and support their mission. Thank you so much, CJ. It was wonderful to get to know you and very impactful work your organization does.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. It was wonderful.
Wonderful. For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube and podcast algorithm that this conversation is important, that we need to support the independent living for all persons with disabilities. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.